welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nick Behringer, and we have another awesome episode for you. We have the one, the only, Erik Grohmann, a.k.a. Grunt Grub, with us. Got another dietitian in the house. You know, that makes me excited. Can't wait to talk nutrition. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, when we were talking before we got started, it's an honor to be here. This is definitely near and dear to my heart, which is why I stayed in the tactical world as a dietitian. So thanks again.
No, yeah, it's great. And I'm glad, as a dietitian. Now, you started off as a Marine. You started off as a Marine infantryman. Can you talk about that? Like, what's your Marine story?
Absolutely. So I'll try to speed through it a little bit. So, I come from a family that I didn't even know anybody was in the military until I kind of brought up the idea that I wanted to join. Turns out my stepdad was he comes from Germany, so he was in the German Air Force, but that's it's not volunteer service. You're mandated to do that as a man in Germany. At least it was when he was there. And then there was a grandfather I had never met because he passed away, but he was in the Army during World War II. But other than that, like growing up, I didn't think anybody in my family was from the military. So it's just something that I felt very passionate about doing. Definitely more of a, the patriotic call to serve kind of thing. And when I was looking at branches, I didn't really know much about the military. So I had a guy that I worked with at an archery shop, and he was like, well, you should do the Marines because, they're the best or whatever. And I was like, all right, well, that sounds good to me. So so I went in, and then I had another guy be like, well, you should probably check out a couple other branches, just to be sure it's what you want. But, once that pill got dropped in my brain, I was like, all right, I think that's the way I'm going to go. So I talked to a couple recruiters, and then I met this guy that's still one of my really good friends, and he was an active duty Marine. He actually he fought through Fallujah. He was in Ramadi, so some pretty heavy fighting. And he told me, he's like, man, you can always join the Marine Corps. You might want to check out college first. He's like, if I could go back in time, that's one thing I'd do. So I ended up doing a year at school, and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I was 18. I still had my mind on the Marine Corps. So, I did well in school, but I definitely didn't have a sense of direction. So ended up joining the Marine Corps. I went infantry, which my recruiter was not very happy about. I did fairly well on the ASVAB, and he did everything in his power to change my mind. But my buddy was in the infantry, and he really convinced me to go that route. He's like, if you want to serve and physically feel that sense, and that's the kind of guy I think you are, I think you should go this route. So I listened to him, and I took it to heart. So I ended up at Camp Pendleton, which was I got lucky because Southern California is a great place to be stationed. And then I served with 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. So it was a unique experience. It wasn't what I was expecting. When I joined the Marine Corps Infantry, I thought I'd serve, 2 tours in Afghanistan. That was kind of my mission at the time. But when I got to my unit, like we were talking about a bit before the show started, we went to Korea initially for like a 2-month show of force. And then our next deployment, we were on the 31st MU, so we were stationed over in the Pacific. And my company was a boat company, so we specialized in raiding small islands on those rubber cricks. So it was pretty cool because, again, like not knowing much about the military going in, I didn't know the Marines were amphibious. I mean, I guess I should have deduced that from the name itself. But so all of my experiences there were pretty much all water-based. We were a boat company, and then as we ended that deployment, moving into my second main deployment, our company transitioned into more of an embassy reaction force, which was very unique. So we dropped the boats, and then each platoon in my company kind of had an individualized task. So my platoon was tasked with indigenous force training. So, like, I don't want to compare myself to Green Berets or ODA or anything like that, but it was really cool. We got to go to school in Virginia at, I want to say we were at Fort Story, and we learned all about, how to link up with and then train an indigenous force. And it was more so if, an embassy were to get attacked, we could go in, we could help train up the local, whether it's the military, guard force, anything like that. So I really got a lot of different experiences through my 4 years of service. And, looking back, it's definitely shaped not only how I am as a dietitian and the way I approach my business and my, client services and when I'm working at the VA with veterans, I'm just so grateful for all the skills and the tools that the military had given me, especially being in the infantry and having the opportunity to be a team leader and a squad leader. Those experiences, are priceless. So that's a little bit about. You got any questions, or is that cover
No, that covers it. But so now, why like infantry to register dietitian? Why become an RD? What led you down that road?
Yeah, so I got out, and I had really mixed feelings about getting out of the military. I definitely liked what I was doing. At the time, I was pretty bitter about not getting a chance to go to Afghanistan. Like you hear about that, it's like warrior's guilt, or I felt like somebody who was on a professional sports team that sat on the bench their career. So, kind of looking towards the future of U.S. operations overseas, I just didn't foresee an opportunity to go over there, and that was one of the reasons I ended up getting out. Which, I look back, I like to say I don't have any regrets, but it was tough getting out of the military. Because I wasn't 100% sure about doing it at the time. There was a little resentment from my last deployment. We were stuck on ship for a long time. I was like, this just isn't, what I thought I'd be doing. So I got out and I said, okay, I've got this GI Bill, which is awesome. I'm good at math and science. I'm a little bit more, motivated now than I was when I was 18. So I feel like I have a sense of direction. I feel like I can maybe tackle some classes that would have been much more challenging for me as a younger man. So I ended up being an engineering major to start, and I chose civil engineering. I was like, that seems cool. I'm good at math and science. Building bridges sounds great. And I was sitting in class one day, and this guy sits next to me. It was a Monday. Great. He's probably an engineer right now, killing it. But I'm like, how was your weekend, man? And he goes, it was awesome. I taught myself how to program on SolidWorks and MATLAB, and I just had a great time. And I was like, that's when the light bulb went off. I was like, oh my goodness, I am not going to be a stellar engineer, because this guy's he's using his weekend time to train himself in the skill set that he's going to be using, and he enjoys it. And to me, I was just getting through it, and I think I had my heart set on a paycheck more than a passionate career. So I went back home. I talked to my wife. I was like going through this like, oh my gosh, I got out of the military. Now I don't want to be an engineer. What do I want to do? And me and my wife were kind of just starting our nutrition journey, and like learning how to cook and experimenting with all that stuff. And we loved it. I've always been into fitness, so it kind of just went hand in hand. So I went back to school the next day, and I was like, look, I want a career in nutrition. I don't know what that looks like, but what are my options? And my counselor's like, well, you could be a dietitian. I was like, that sounds great. Let's change my career track. And I just went with it, and it's been a great experience ever since.
Wow. Well, then, so becoming a dietitian, right? You just like civil engineering, not for you. All right, let's try nutrition, and now we're to Grunt Grub. How did that come about? Like, where was that kind of come from?
Yeah, so I knew in the again, kind of like when I joined the military, like I did do thorough research about becoming a dietitian. I just knew that I wanted to be in the nutrition world. So as you well know, going into the field of dietetics, it's not just performance nutrition, right? In fact, that's such a small aspect of what most schools teach. There's clinical nutrition, working with patients in the hospital. We've got the community nutrition aspect, and then the food service aspect. So I knew that my heart was really set on performance. Now, I didn't close myself off to other opportunities. I stayed very open-minded throughout my education in case something would come about that I was more passionate about. But as I went on through the schooling, my passion for the performance aspect did not change, right? And I was out on a really long run. I was actually in the middle of training for a marathon. So I was on like a 15-mile run one day, and I was just running by the beach, and I'm thinking about my business, and like, because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't see any other route to take in terms of like tactical nutrition. In fact, I didn't know much about tactical nutrition at that time. So I was like, all right, like I'm going to try to do this on my own. I kind of know the demographic I want to work with. These are the people that are, near and dear to me. And I was like going through business names in my head, and Grunt Grub popped up, and I was in like mile 10. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I got to go home and research this to make sure like it's not taken on Instagram so I did some Google research, and no one had it. So I locked up the name and kind of went with it. And then the logo was designed by one of my dietetics classmates who has like a little side hustle doing artwork. So if anybody needs something cool drawn up graphically, she's the girl. She did a fantastic job.
And the logo, so for those who see it, you got to go look at it at the show, because I thought I did cool with with the Fuel the Fight and the apple and the target. Mine was amateur hour compared to what Erik's got going on. He has an apple turned into a hand grenade, which I'm like, it's so awesome. I love it. But so you became a dietitian. You have this great Grunt Grub idea. I look at your Instagram, these beautiful meals that you're preparing. Where did you learn to cook like that? Where did that come into play?
It's definitely been a journey. Like I said, so let me back up a little bit. So I'd like to say I get my passion for cooking from my father, but having grown up in Wisconsin, and we come from a very German background, so a lot of our meals are very hearty, right? So it's like big portions of meat, white pasta noodles, Spätzle for my German listeners out there, gravies, heavy sauces, things like that. So, and grilling's big. Like I said, tailgating's huge out here. So I knew how to cook in that regard. Like I could just see him being fired up. Like he loved cooking for the family and for friends, and just like the passion he had for it and the enjoyment he got from seeing somebody eat the food he prepared. So he showed me the basics, and he was the one that kind of told me, like, cooking's one of the skill sets that you need. It's going to make you independent. You're not going to have to rely on anybody. So I took that to heart when I went to school before the military. I cooked for myself, but it wasn't anything very nutritious. Like I could get by, and I knew how to cook several different things, but I wouldn't consider them the most nutritious meals. And I wasn't choosing my food with a purpose like I do now. So as I going through the military, I didn't hardly cook at all, because I lived in the barracks for the majority of my career. So when I got out and I was living on my own again, it's like, well, now it's time to kind of figure it out. And I had this newfound sense of, again, like performance mindset coming out of the military. I was like, okay, I really need to fuel my body now. So, but I didn't know much, right? I mean, I'm still just a dumb grunt in a way, right? So I come out and I'm just motivated, and I've got a lot of bro science floating around my head. So I started experimenting with different diets. Like we did the paleo diet for a while, and I thought that was end all be all. And it wasn't really until my nutrition courses where I really started to learn the fundamentals of nutrition and fueling the body that I started incorporating more foods. So from there, I really like cultural foods. Like if I go out to restaurants, right, I wasn't just sticking to German restaurants like my background. I love Mexican food, Mediterranean food, Middle Eastern food, Asian food. And I realized, wow, all of the foods that I'm learning about that are so good for my body, well, like all these cultural foods have all that good stuff loaded with plant foods, lots of colors, things like that. The flavor profiles are next level. So from there, I started just experimenting with recipes. So going on Pinterest, looking at cookbooks, things like that. And so all the stuff that I've been posting recently, a lot of that stuff's really self-taught, and it's a lot of experimenting.
No, that's impressive, because I thought maybe there was some formal training or a course you snuck in there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I mean the pictures are amazing. It looks delicious. If you could taste something through a picture, definitely taste it through your pictures there. So with that, knowing kind of those young Marines maybe out there listening, or soldiers or airmen, whoever. What's some advice, some practical advice for cooking for service members who don't cook now that you could kind of give them?
Absolutely. So with cooking itself, I'd say it all depends with where you're at starting, right? Like if you don't know how to cook an egg in your let's say rudimentary skill level, you got to start to learn the basics first. And nowadays, one of the best parts of the age we live in is that there's so much access out there. Whether you want to look it up on YouTube, whether you want to read it in a cookbook, go on your phone and get Pinterest, you can watch it on a cooking show on TV. There's so many options for you to go out and learn. If you wanted to take a culinary class, that's probably like the next level up in terms of commitment. But, starting to build your foundational skill sets, just like any military MOS, right? Once you have the basics mastered, right? Like you understand how certain foods cook, whether it's meat, whether it's vegetables, things like that, and you get that down, you can really start expanding your base. So I'd say, start small and start with what what's already in your wheelhouse, right? So If you know how to cook eggs, well, from there you can move up to cooking omelets, and you can mess around with adding different things to those omelets, right? And maybe you can learn how to cook an omelet over a fire or on a stove or in a microwave. So it's really just starting there and really being honest with yourself and identifying your own capabilities and limitations, whether it's your own personal knowledge and skill set or your access to the materials and equipment needed to prepare certain foods. And once you get that, you can really branch off. When it comes to like the cooking I do, one of the pieces of advice I give to a lot of people is, if you don't know where to start, because that's, I guess the other edge of the coin, or the other side of the coin is, because we have access to so much, it becomes overwhelming for people. People often ask me like, oh, where do I look for recipes? Where do I look for recipes? And it's like, man, there's so many cookbooks out there, and there's Pinterest has a zillion recipes. It's almost tough to narrow down. I think it's almost easier if somebody just kind of gives you a basic list to start with, because then you're like, all right, I'm just going to stick with these. So a piece of advice I give to a lot of people is, if you go out to eat at a restaurant and you really like a meal, kind of take note of that, and then go home and try to replicate that meal in however you want, right? You can add, you can take away. I do a lot more cooking than I do baking. And I think what I like most about cooking is that there's so much room for, like being off a little bit and adding and taking away. Like with baking, if you're off like a quarter teaspoon, your recipe might not turn out. But with cooking, it's like, oh, I'm going to toss a little bit of this spice in, or I'm going to add this vegetable, or I'm going to try this out. And typically it all turns out good. It's really hard to mess up. So just get outside your comfort zone and trying new stuff. That's probably my biggest advice.
No, solid advice. I like that. What about, especially like, trying a meal at a restaurant and then trying to recreate it at home? But now, what about the war fighters living in the barracks? Do you have any barrack nutrition secrets that you could provide?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people think living in the barracks is a negative, and I would disagree with that. I probably would have agreed with them when I was living in the barracks too. Of course, like infantry men and Marines, I'm speaking only from my experience here, so it's my opinions only. But, we like to gripe quite a bit, right? Like we always have an issue with something. So the chow hall's like, oh, that food and this and that. But I mean, if you think about it, when you have the opportunity to go to a chow hall 3 times a day where all the food's prepared for you, that kind of takes cooking out of the equation. You actually end up saving quite a bit of time. Not to mention, this day and age, most of the food you can find at the chow halls is extremely diverse. There's a lot of options, especially at the salad bar and at the main tray line, and being able to get chicken breast for a little extra lean protein, things like that. But I'll stick away from the chow hall for now. That's just my notes on that. For barrack rooms specifically, I'd say, going back to kind of what I just talked about, it's again understanding what our capabilities and limitations are. Do we have access to a fridge? Do we have access to a freezer? Do we have a microwave? Are we allowed to keep like small George Foreman grills in our room? Do we have a toaster? Things like that. Once you identify what your capabilities are, it is really easy to come up with a ton of different things that you can use and keep in your room at all times, right? So, for example, if you have a microwave, a lot of people don't know you can cook eggs in a microwave. And if you have a mini fridge to store those eggs, well, great. Now you can have high protein meal with a little fat in the morning. You can easily stack that with some carbohydrate that doesn't even need to be refrigerated, whether it's a piece of fruit, maybe some whole wheat bread, something along those lines. But, I think people sell a lot of the equipment short, like, oh, I just got a mini fridge and a microwave. But it's like, you can do so much with that. Not to mention, if you're on a limited budget, let's say you're a private first class, you don't have a lot of income, I'd say, hey, try to go out to a store like Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club. If you got something like that nearby to save some money, you can even go on it with your roommate if you live in a double bunked room, or maybe a big group of friends, and get something in bulk, especially pre-packaged food. Like some things I always recommend to my clients are, things like small nut packages, so like mixed nuts, right? That's a great form of fuel you can keep in your cargo pocket. You can eat before an event if you're not going to have the opportunity to eat. Pre-packaged carbohydrates, like little fruit snacks from real fruit, of course. A lot of fruit to keep on hand, but things like that are ways that you can supplement your diet that should be provided mostly from the chow hall, right? Like everyone should, and I emphasize should, and I'm sure we're going to get into this here, have access to the chow hall 3 meals a day when you're not in the field. So, but if you're PTing at 6, right? Well, the chow hall is not going to open until after PT. So how do you fuel if you want to fuel before that PT session, right? And that's definitely going to be more of the stuff that you keep on hand in the barracks room.
No, that's all solid advice. I like that. And yeah, you can do a lot with a microwave, for sure.
Heck yeah.
What were the biggest nutritional challenges you faced in the Marines, or that you see?
Absolutely. Well, I'd say the biggest one for me was a lack of knowledge. I relied, and this is on me, looking back and kind of taking ownership of it. I definitely could have done a better job of doing quality, research in terms of who I'm getting my advice from. But I think when you're that age, it's so easy to just listen to the guys that are slightly older than you. And that makes sense, right? Well, if you look at their body and their physical physique and their performance, and you can say, well, that guy's jacked and he tells me to do this, so I'm just going to do whatever he does. And there's so much bro science and pseudoscience that comes into it. Eating high volumes of protein with no carbohydrate was like a big one. And just having a lack of knowledge was a big struggle. I guess I didn't realize it, though, until I went through my education that, wow, I could have probably been fueling my body so much better having the knowledge I have now. But I'd say the other one, especially living in the barracks, and this is a cultural issue, and I try to talk about this on my social media platform, but drinking for me was a huge performance hindrance. And I mean, it was a huge cultural thing in the Marine Corps. It was a huge cultural thing living in the barracks. I mean, we would be having beers every night. Now, it wasn't in excess all the time, but there was a lot of times it was. But I mean, we're talking all throughout the week. Didn't matter if we were training the next day, going on hikes. I mean, that's just what the lifestyle was. And again, looking back, I think I had this mindset of, it's like, well, heck, if I can do this and then go bust out a 15-mile hike tomorrow, like nothing's going to stop me. But now, being older and hopefully wiser, and having the education behind the effects of alcohol, how our bodies metabolize alcohol, how our bodies prefer to metabolize alcohol over all their nutrients and the downstream effects of that, I look back and I have that same feeling like, wow, what could have I been if I didn't spend so much time drinking and more time getting quality sleep, eating quality foods, hydrating properly? Because to have this mindset of, oh, it's cool and you're a beast if you can drink and do this stuff, that's misguided. It's cool to be the best you can be. It's cool to be a beast. It's cool to be the best in your platoon, the best in your company, and to be a stud. And when you go out drinking, you're definitely limiting your own potential. Whether you're a beast or not and can bust out a 300 PFT, you could be even better than that person if you really pay attention to your own personal, sleep habits, quality fueling, which obviously I'm biased towards, and physical fitness. So does that answer your question?
No, that's great, and that's perfect. And I'm so glad you touched on the alcohol piece, because culturally it's the same, I think, for all military services, and it's nice to have you address it in that way. It's like, hey, you recognize that even though I was able to do these things, it still was, kind of a governor on my performance, and I probably could have been even better. No, that's great.
And if you don't mind me adding one piece just really quick, I don't want to have anybody under the impression that I think that you should absolutely abstain from alcohol. I think there is also a beneficial piece to that culture of going out with your boys or girls and having a drink, but do it at the appropriate time. Do your best to do it in the appropriate amount, and I think you really be surprised with how well you feel. So I don't want people to think that I recommend fully abstaining. I mean, if you fully abstain, that's totally good, but I don't think that's the I don't think it's really, what's the best word to describe this? Appropriate, necessary. I don't want to take that aspect away from the culture, because it is a good bonding and rapport building, thing. So I just wanted to touch on that.
No, that's good. Hey, I hear you. A couple, beers, or two on the weekends with the comrades, always, not a bad thing. Every night in the barracks, going through a 6-pack can be problematic. So, or you're not going to reach your optimum performance level. No, I hear you on that. What would you say that's kind of the biggest area that the military can improve nutrition-wise? Like military, I know you got your Marine perspective. I'm using military as a whole. Like, Like, what can the military do to improve the nutrition environment for the warfighter?
So I am a huge believer in education being a pillar in the development and understanding of any concept. So I think the military does do a really good job of making sure that the access to the right nutrients are available to the warfighter. So I cannot remember her name, but you had on the food scientist that works with MREs. And I actually learned quite a bit from that podcast about what actually goes into an MRE. And I had to adjust some of my own personal biases and beliefs from that episode, which was great. And I think, like I talked about at the Chow Hall, there are so many options for somebody to adequately fuel their body and get a wide, diverse range of nutrients that there's no issues there. So between MREs and the Chow Hall, the military does give you the access. What the military, I think, falls short on in a lot of areas is not educating their personnel on how to utilize the quality food that they're giving to their troops. So if there was more emphasis put on training and education, now it would be nice to have a dietitian in every unit, right? That would be like my ultimate dream, is to have a dietitian in any military unit, no matter what capacity they're
Mine
in.
too.
Because I believe that. So, let's just say that's not going to happen for an extended period of time. Well, I think what the military could do in the interim is utilize the dietitians that they have currently, utilize dietitians that are private and can be contracted out, and then use them to teach the leaders of small units so that they can go back and at least give quality nutrition advice to their troops, right? So whether that's squad leaders, whether that's platoon commanders, whether that's company commanders, even up to battalion commanders, if they could go to a seminar hosted by a dietitian that helps them create materials then to disseminate to their troops, whether it's PowerPoint presentations, handouts, and touch on it every now and again, a couple times a year. I know, in the Marine Corps, I'm sure it's the same across the military as a whole, but like, we hated mandatory training, right? Like, it was taken away from our real infantry stuff. So like anything like that, we didn't like. But I heard somebody say the other day, I can't remember who they were on Instagram, but they said nutrition is a basic infantry skill. And I think it's a basic military skill. I think everyone needs to accept that, because our bodies are our greatest weapon. If we cannot adequately perform in the field or do our jobs because our bodies are limiting us, well, that's a major problem. That's a huge problem. And I think if the military understood that better and it came top down, they put more emphasis on that education piece, right? Even in boot camp, I mean, to kick a single nutrition class to the recruits, I mean, what a great idea. All it has to do is take up one class on one day of all the classes we get. That does not seem unrealistic to me. And you're getting such a wide audience then. So education is the big piece. That's where I think the military could do the most improving on.
No, I love it. And then Dr. Erin Gaffney Stomberg, if anybody's listening to that episode on MREs, yeah, she crushed it. That was a great episode. Every episode's great, but no, I was excited for that because, knowing and having worked with like the MRE folks, I knew all the myths and I knew the truth. So that was a lot of fun. So I'm glad you.
Yeah, that was great. I learned quite a bit. So
yeah.
Thanks for having her on. That was a great one.
No, I'm glad she got on. No, I love it. Education is a big piece, and I'm glad you're saying it, because as an infantryman, realizing, hey, I've got all these tasks, but nutrition is an important piece, because I think that's a lot of it, is just getting commanders to understand, and more are, at least I know for the Army side of it, that hour that you block off to give some nutrition education, you're going to get a great return on investment from that, especially down the road. No, I love it. Where can folks reach you? Where can they find you if they want to find more about you?
Absolutely. So the best place to reach me as of right now is through social media, through my Instagram page. So it's just Grunt Grub. Like you said earlier, the logo's a hand grenade apple, so hopefully pretty easy to find. And then from there, you can access my website. You can email me direct. But, I always encourage people to ask questions, reach out. I love when people ask questions in the comments, because, again, I'm so focused on education. I want people to ask. Like, these are the people that I care most about. That this demographic of grunts, right? And of course I say grunt coming from the infantry, but really all the people in the military doing physical work, right? Whether you're cranking wrenches or you're in the trenches, something like that. That actually rhymed. That would be a good catchphrase. Just
I like it.
Realizing that. But but I consider all those people grunts, and you know, ask me questions, hit me up in my direct messages. I'd love to answer it. I just want to give you the tools necessary. I do my best touching on topics through my you know, generic posts, and I get most of those ideas from actual people in the military, law enforcement, and firefighters that say, hey, I'd love to hear you talk about something like this. So if you have an idea of something that you would like me to touch on, just reach out. I'd be happy to do so.
No, it's great, and definitely I will echo. You know, follow Grunt Grub. You get some great recipe ideas. Although sometimes it is a little demoralizing when I like make a meal for my family and I think like, man, I really crushed it. And then I look over and see a picture like Erik posted. I'm like, it looks nothing like that. What is that gonna? Your presentation skills, another level. You know, Erik, thanks so much for being on today. Really appreciate it. Do you have any closing thoughts or any like last thoughts for the audience?
Yeah. So if I could give some final words, I'd just like to say, you know, again, get outside your comfort zone, take the initiative and take it upon yourself. If you don't have access to a registered dietitian, right, there is going to be someone on your base nearby that you can find through social media. Be resourceful, reach out, be bold, ask them to help you. If you're passionate about taking your nutrition to the next level and really wanting to do it, be resourceful and find somebody that can help you develop that skill set. And if you're a leader of troops, this is who I really want to get out to, or a leader in a law enforcement department or a firehouse, right? Take it upon yourself to educate yourself so that you can educate the men below you, because it's all gonna make you better at the end of the day, right? A squad is only as good as its weakest man. So the more you educate your troops, law enforcement officers, firefighters on these basics, okay, the better overall result you're gonna get. So I just really encourage people to take the initiative and find somebody to help them do that and get evidence-based quality advice so that we can start kind of weeding out all this pseudo and bro science that has just been contaminating the ranks for centuries now, I'm sure.
I love it. Contaminating. I love it. Erik, hey, thanks so much. This has been an awesome episode. I've had fun. Again, I'm biased. I love talking to fellow dietitians. Thank you for your service. And no, it's been a great episode. And for everybody listening, whether you're, hold on, let's see if I get this right, cranking wrenches or digging trenches, you got to eat right. You got to fuel the fight. And this has been this episode. Until next time, we'll see you at the Fuel the Fight podcast. Thank you for listening.